Welcome to the In My Opinion show with Ronald Barry Robinson and friends, seen on the internet 24 hours, 7 days a week. We have a wonderful, wonderful show in store for our millions of viewers worldwide. Let me introduce our guests. We have Miss Brenda Williams. We have the Honorable Judge Herman Marable Jr., and I'm going to let this gentleman introduce himself.
A friend of Fred Robinson, Howard Turner, better known as Beaver.
Beaver. Welcome all to the In My Opinion show.
Thank you.
Tribute to a friend. Attorney C. Frederick Robinson, a man for all seasons. The reality of life must include our acceptance that death is part of our existence, and all of us will experience the taste of death as our divine existence returns to its source, Almighty God. But between the beginning of life and the final period is a question. What will we do with the time that God gives us? If we spend our time in trivial pursuits, our living and our dying are in vain. But if we devote ourselves to the higher values and bigger purposes, the purpose of freedom, justice, and equality, and the reformation and upliftment of a fallen people, we are on the right course. Attorney C. Frederick Robinson, born Carius Frederick Robinson, August 13, 1931, into the virulent racism of the segregated South, and departed this world June 18, 2001. Fought that very racism that he was born into with the heart of a lion. Fred was a giant of a human being. This giant of a man, both in his private and professional life, equality was his passion, his obsession. C.F. Robinson graduated from Howard University with a law degree in 1956. In 1956, Fred moved to Flint, Michigan, and opened a law office with his longtime friend and partner, attorney A. Glenn Epps, where he continued to practice law until his untimely murder on June 18, 2011, by some as yet unknown coward or cowards. If you know or have information on C.F. Robinson's murder, please contact your nearest law enforcement agency. We have on our planet black, brown, red, yellow, and white, and what we have known of each other is the worst of each other. This is because the educational system of America was set up to support the false premise of white supremacy. White folks are victimized by that madness, and so are we, because when we meet each other as adversaries. At some point, we must outgrow stupidity. C.F. Robinson, the man, the attorney in his professional life, fought against racism, bigotry, and inequality. With his many allies in the community of all colors, he created organizations for the empowerment of all, but especially in the black community, where his name and accomplishments will live on. He would often say that the bonds of mental slavery and oppression must be broken. Through his advocacy in the Flint, Michigan branch of the NAACP and his renowned knowledge and scholarship of the legal world that benefited rich, poor, black, and white, he sought to show the community and the world the fallacy of white superiority and how the barriers of structural and societal racism limited the potential of all people. Fred welcomed all who were willing to join him in his struggle for racial equality and economic justice. Justice, not money, motivated C.F. Robinson. He practiced law for over 55 years, believing that it was his duty as a lawyer to contribute to society. Like the real Clarence Darrow, C.F. Robinson took on unpopular causes and clients. He represented the powerful and the powerless, the innocent and the guilty, with the same energy and zeal. C.F. Robinson touched many lives as a father, husband, attorney, ally, friend, and mentor. He lived a rich life full of joy, sadness, and disappointments, but with few regrets. And through it all, Fred did it his way. The body of Carius Frederick Robinson has been returned to the earth, and his essence has returned to Almighty God. But the lessons from his life remain and are worthy of study. We thank God for this human being and community builder, and pray that we will use the lessons from his life to help effectuate true equality and justice for all. There could be no more of a fitting tribute to him. So long, my friend. You will be truly missed. Ms. Williams, let's go to you next. Tell our millions of viewers about C.F. Robinson?
Well, I moved here with my family in 1966, and my father was a physician over at Flint General Hospital, where Fred was also an attorney and working with the board with the community. And I've heard about Fred Robinson's. I heard Fred Robinson's name from the time I was about 11 years old up until this day. My family, having come from Mississippi and Louisiana, Southerners, were very close to Fred. My father worked with Fred along with many other people in this community at Flint General Hospital. Whenever there was a legal issue, I would hear my dad say, take it to Fred. When I got out of law school, the one thing my father said to me, he said, you need to learn some common sense. He said, I'm taking you to Fred Robinson. And he went to Fred and said, I want you to teach my child about the law. And I can truly say that watching Fred Robinson, listening to Fred Robinson, has given me an education that I have been blessed to have received, probably more so than what the books or what the law school classes could have given me. Because as Fred always reminded me, so much like my father used to say, he would ask the question, what did it say? What did it mean? In other words, Fred said, always look between the lines, not just at the black and white of the letters. So as you read the law, Fred would say, now what did it truly mean? And I think that Fred probably gave me an education that not too many people can truly say that they have received when it comes to the spirit of the law rather than the letter of the law.
Okay, Judge Marable, what are your thoughts? Two questions. What are your thoughts, and what are your fondest thoughts?
Well, I remember meeting Fred Robinson when I was in high school. Somebody who knew that I wanted to become an attorney said, well, I want to introduce you, to someone. And that was the first time I met Fred Robinson. And, he was a very engaging figure. And I think for many attorneys and people in political life in this community, Fred was somewhat of a mentor to some and a consultant to many. He was the type of person that you wanted to know what he thought. And if you didn't find out what he thought, he was certainly going to tell you whether you wanted to hear it or not. And my next encounters with Fred after high school came when I was in law school. And Fred was running for judge at this time. This was in, I think, 1986, if I'm not mistaken. I worked on his campaign a little bit, and Fred decided that he was going to do a TV commercial. And I helped to put together the TV commercial. Well, Fred has all these accomplishments in this community, in terms of integrating cemeteries and the school system, getting the loitering ordinance thrown out, and getting the open housing law passed. He was, active in all of these groundbreaking civil rights achievements in this community. Now, to compress all of the things that he did, and we haven't even talked about the political thing, and I hope Mr. Turner there talks about the Community Civic League and everything, because he certainly can talk about that. But legally and politically, to try to compress all of that into a 30-second commercial was basically, impossible. You couldn't really do it. But those are some of my fondest memories, and also when I ran for judge, he was a supporter of mine and very encouraging, and he gave me some good advice. So and then of course there is the professional relationship that I had with him when I was a prosecutor and he was on the other side of cases. And then when I was, since I've been a judge, and he would come to my court. So I have a lot of memories, a lot of positive memories. He did a lot for the community. He was helpful to me, and I just don't think a lot of the young people even have a sense of the history of what he accomplished. And maybe what the community was like not even more than 40 years ago. So those are some of my fondest memories of him.
Well, I knew Fred, I met him, I guess probably about 5 years ago when I joined the Flint branch in the NAACP. He's the chairman of the legal redress, and I'm on that committee. And he was very helpful in a number of situations. For me, I would call him, and I would always get through. And he gave me a lot of tips. Mr. Turner, what are your thoughts?
Well, I met Fred probably in 1957 or 58, and it wasn't under the best of circumstances when he and I met, because Fred was representing my first wife in a divorce settlement. And I don't even know if Fred had an office at that time, but he came by my house in his car, and he told me that he was representing my wife, and he was looking for a settlement, and he started pretty high. And at that time, I told him there was no way I could do that. I could come up with that money. So I think we finally settled for me to pay my wife's legal fee, which was, Fred, I think, got about $400 or $500 out of the deal. And the next time I met Fred, I think he and Glenn had teamed up, and they were law partners. And Fred and I become pretty good friends. So one night we were at the Golden Leaf Club, which was our regular watering hole. And Fred came to me. We started drinking. Fred had a few, and he told me, he said, I want to get the working people and the black working people and the black professional people together, because it seems that the black professional people think that people are going to think a little bit rough of them if they associate with the working class of blacks. And he asked me, he says, I want you to help me. So I told him at that time, I said, Fred, we've got a very good black caucus down in my plant, 659. And I could get those guys together and have you talk with them. And we could see if we could form a coalition between the black working people and the black professionals. So he thought it was a good idea. So I called the group together, and the group had some pretty famous names at that time. I think we had Chuck Yancey and Eddie Little and Chester Simmons and Henry Burns. And anyway, we met. And I didn't really realize what Fred had up his sleeve at that time, but we formed the Community Civic League. And boy, I'll tell you, Fred was off and running. His wife had pressure on him at that time, was talking with him, and she wanted us to elect a black Board of Education. And so we got together, and Fred picked Dr. Williams. Well, I questioned Fred's choice on that. But after I met Dr. Williams, I come to realize that Fred had a good choice at that time.
And this is T. Wendell Williams.
Yeah, T. Wendell Williams, where the place up there on the North Saginaw is named after him. I think he was a pediatrician at that time in the city of Flint. And we got out and we worked, and we got Dr. Williams elected. And from there on, like I said, Fred was off the trot. And after we got Williams elected, then you can think of Helen Harris and Paul Newman and all of those guys standing on the shoulder of what we did in that deal there. And Fred accomplished a lot in this community. And as we get further in the program, there's a lot of things I want to tell you about Fred.
Well, I think that Beaver, Mr. Turner said it well. A lot of things that we today as blacks are doing, are living, is predicated upon the foundation, the legal foundation that Fred Robinson instituted or was a part of. And as I mentioned, sometimes it's so easy to live your life every day and to think it's something that's just what was a natural progression. Well, nothing is really a natural progression as it relates to your living in terms of when you look at the Flint Board of Education, you have a black superintendent. You have black administrators. When Fred Robinson came here in 1956, you didn't have that. In fact, you had a separate screening committee for both, one for whites, one for blacks. Fred filed the necessary legal proceedings to terminate that type of discrimination. When blacks now live in Grand Blanc, and they live in Penton, they live in Swartz Creek, or they live in Flushing, they think it's natural that they can just walk to those neighborhoods. I did not know that when we came here in 1966, and we moved under Mr. Fred Tucker, who was also a councilman and a real estate agent, moved us to West Jameson Street. I didn't know blacks didn't go west of Detroit Street at that time. But we presume, and I think one of the things that's very important, if anything about Fred Robinson's life that's very important in this community, is that we need to learn our history. And we need to learn where things originated and how it originated. And I think by doing that, it gives you a better sense of purpose as we go along and making decisions as to how to even improve where we are today. And unfortunately, we as black, and I'm going to say we in generally as black professionals, we tend to have this sense of being more than the other. And where I come from in Mississippi, we didn't know the difference because you had black teachers, you had black doctors, you had black skilled people, you had people who worked in the fields, but you know what they had? They had a community. We had a community that we worked together. And I think that's what Fred Robinson wanted. He wants, and it's not all about black, but Fred knew that blacks had was not given the opportunity that they should be given. But Fred wanted to see us, one, as blacks work together, and two, as a community work together. I think that, and especially with the judge sitting here and the legal system, and when Fred talks about justice, he wasn't talking about letting a murderer go free. But what he's talking about is the same principles, the same considerations that you give one of another color. He's saying it shouldn't even be color considered. It should be colorless. And that we should be giving everyone the right justice and being fair. And Fred, to this day, I understand, up until the day of his death, was talking to the prosecutor's office, talking to the prosecutor about diversity and about how even the prosecutor's office should look diverse. And because I think that even with the appointment I have, it was a result of my relationship with Fred Robinson, having been
when you were the chief assistant, first African American chief assistant prosecutor in the South.
And I think it's because of being with Fred and setting the stage. But I just think that Fred Robinson's name should never be forgotten.
Well, let's hope
Forgotten
so.
in this community.
Let's hope not. Let's talk about some of Fred's accomplishments. His civil rights achievements include being instrumental in the 1968 passage of the Fair Housing Ordinance, making Flint one of the first cities in the nation to pass an open housing referendum by popular vote, initiating the complaint that led to the elimination of separate screening committees for teachers based upon race by the Flint Board of Education, initiating a lawsuit to permit blacks to be buried in formerly all-white cemetery, Flint Memorial Park, his final resting place, drafted the proposed ordinance to establish the Flint Human Relations Commission, suing the city of Flint to challenge its refusal to allow the erection of a platform on the Flint City Hall lawn to hold an NAACP rally, participating in the lawsuit Clifford Scott versus the city of Flint, which enacted affirmative action for minority contractors, representing state workers in a federal lawsuit to enforce affirmative action in the state of Michigan Department of Corrections. Maybe that's why I got hired.
Well, I mean,
23 years.
Could be.
Participating in the effort to protect Jerry Beatty, a black person who moved into an all-white area in Mount Pleasant from Mount Morris from white mob violence. That's outstanding just by itself, and I'm sure that there's a whole list of other things. And here's some more. Appearing as a friend of the court in Civil Rights Commission, Fred Calhoun versus GM, in which Mr. Calhoun sued for admittance to the Skilled Trades Program, participating in a lawsuit to declare the arbitrary arrest of blacks through use of loitering ordinance unconstitutional, participating in an effort to elect Michigan's first black Secretary of State, advocating for the appointment of a black person to the Flint Municipal Court, organizing persons to picket Michigan National Bank to urge it to hire its first black employee in positions above janitor or elevator operator, leading in the campaign to have the first black elected to the Flint Board of Education. Wow, that's very impressive.
Let's talk about the Fair Housing Ordinance for a minute, if you will. When Fred formed the Community Civic League, he went around, he got the best and the brightest. He had people like Floyd McCree and Nate Turner and Willa Hawkins and Eddie Little and you just name it.
And Woody Ethelbert.
Well, Woody was young at that time. Woody was very young. And let me tell you what happened at this. Fred got with Floyd, and Floyd was mayor at that time. And Floyd wanted the council at that time to draft a resolution to put a to adapt a fair housing ordinance. And the council had said that they would go along with it, but when they come time to vote, they didn't do it. And so Floyd wanted to resign at that time, and Fred talked him out of resigning. And we were able to get that resolution on the ballot. And the city of Flint responded and passed that resolution. But Fred was very instrumental in that. What he did also at that time, he hooked up with Pastor Reverend Robs. And Reverend Robs at that time was pretty powerful. He was one of the powerfulest minority minister in this town. And he had a very elegant voice, good speaker. And we had a rally on City Hall. And Governor Romney was invited here. And Reverend Rob got to bearing down on it and never will forget that Romney told him, said, well, now, kind of cool it off, Reverend, because that time things would get hot. He didn't want no riot here at that time. But anyway, we passed that ordinance, and I'll tell you some other guys that were instrumental and was talking. At that time, GM had begun to bring in salary minorities, Paul Newman and Dick Donaldson, and we had rallies, meetings down to City Hall at the council meeting, and they really participated, and things got really hot around here. But narrowly we voted. When we had the voting was over with, the ordinance passed, and I give 90% of that credit to Fred Robinson because he really worked on that ordinance. Fred did, and it's because of that ordinance that you're able to go out to Grand Blanc and Mount Morris and different things of that way. I don't think people realized at that time.
Right.
But that's just the way it was at that time.
Well, let's talk about Fred's affiliations, past and present. Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, Christ Fellowship Missionary Baptist Church, NAACP Life Member, former Chairman Executive Board, NAACP Flint Branch, National Lawyers Guild, organizer and founder, Community Civic League, organizer and founder, Urban Coalition of Flint, organizer and founder of 7th District Black Caucus, attorney for the former Flint General Hospital, attorney for the Hamilton Community Health Network. His recent honors include National Bar Association, Hall of Fame, the Flint Club of the National Association of Negro Business, and Professional Women's Clubs Incorporated. This is very impressive, and we're going to miss you, Fred. Thank my guests, Ms. Williams, Mr. Turner, Judge Marable, for enlightening the world on C. Frederick Robinson's life. Until next time, this is Ronald Bay Robinson for the In My Opinion show. Stay focused.